You know, a sword always has been more than just a weapon. Across all cultures, across all time periods, it stood for something more. It's not just a piece of sharpened cold steel. It stands for honor, discipline, courage, wisdom, status, power, strength, and so much more. And that's why we see the swords everywhere we look, in books, in history, in movies, in video games, even in cartoons. Because a sword carries more meaning than any kind of other weapon, like axes, spears, or blunt heavy weapons. Point number 1. The sword as responsibility. Carrying a sword wasn't just about looking cool. It wasn't about bragging. It's not just like having some Rolex on your arms. It was about responsibility. If you carried one, you showed to others that you had the power to take lives, but also the duty to protect it, to preserve it. Knights of Europe, Japanese samurai, even Polish, Lithuanian Commonwealth noblemen had their own sabers, or Asian kings and emperors. All of them, when they held their sword in their hands, they showed to others that they had the weight of responsibility. By this, they told the world that they bear the weight of that duty. And that responsibility shapes a man. It forces you to become someone else and to act differently. Point number 2. So, the sword as power and status. Think about it. Have you ever seen commanders and kings leading their armies with an axe or with a spear? Well, yes, there are actually a few instances when, of course, the commanders and leaders led their people with other weapons. But all of us instinctively know that nearly all of them led their armies with a sword. Because the sword isn't just a battlefield tool, it's also a status in metal. It showed that I rule, I command, I protect my people. That's why swords are still crowned as ceremonial weapons even today, because we all instinctively know that they're not just for fighting, they're for leading. Point number 3. The swords across cultures. Every culture shaped their own blade, but the symbolism always stuck. All of them. Viking swords, European arming swords, longswords, Japanese katanas, Chinese dao, even later ones like Polish and Lithuanian Commonwealth sabers, Asian swords, Middle Eastern swords, rapiers, and even two-handers like Zweihander and Montante to some extent. They all had the same symbolism. They're not just a battlefield tools. They described and showed each culture by the design of their own swords, and they represented their rich history. And that's why I've built my community called From Gamer to Swordsman, because too many guys are stuck with fake pixels of these swords when the real thing is much closer than you think. So check out the link in the description to find more. Point number 4. The sword in our culture and media. Even today you see it everywhere. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, even in cartoons like Adventure Time. The heroes don't wield or carry a stick or a club. He carries a sword because we all instinctively know that the sword represents much more than just a tool for killing. It represents courage, self-growth, self-discipline, honor, wisdom, and just the hero's journey. And that's why today's gaming corporation use this tactic, because they know that the sword is magnetic. But if they know how to sell it to you through their games, then you're completely cooked. They know how to trap you with their shiny pixels, because they know that the sword is magnetic. But holding a real thing, it's entirely different experience. And training with it, that's not fantasy, that's something that you can live. Just like me, when I started my longsword journey around 2 years ago. Point number 5, the sword as discipline. The sword in untrained hands is just a dead weight. Someone who doesn't know how to use the sword properly is more dangerous to himself than to his opponents and enemies. And that's why I think that the sword always stood for discipline. Because through repetitions, through drills, through constant improving, through sweating and bleeding into your mastery, that grind is the only way to make the sword just an extension of yourself. And that's why the sword is just a perfect symbol of discipline, because without it, the strength will always collapse. And sword, being just a simple tool, is an extension of your will. It's the mirror of your own mindset and skill. Point number 6, the sword as transformation. Here's what I really love the most. That when you pick up the sword for the first time, you feel its heavy weight. And by that, it forces you to be aware, to come back to the present moment. And then you know that the sword has no distractions. It has no fake rewards. And you know that you stopped hiding from your own potential. You stopped running from yourself. Because you have to face on your fears, your lack of skill and knowledge. And by that you start to move sharper and you feel more alive. You feel more gratitude for your own life, because you know the weight of taking your opponent's life to defend your own. And that's what I really love about longsword, that it becomes a mirror of yourself. It shows you your failures. It shows you where you lack. But it also shows what person you can become if you just keep sharpening yourself. Point number 7, the sword as an extension of the self. At the end of the day, the sword is just only a tool. It's only an extension of yourself. It mirrors your potential, your courage, your strength, your wisdom. If you give a sword to a weak man, that man will still be weak. But if you give a sword to someone who's disciplined, who's training, who's growing, who comes through his trials and tribulations, who knows the value of life, who has courage in the face of chaos, even when he fears something, but he still does it. That man will be unstoppable, because the sword will amplify himself. And at the end of the day, the sword doesn't give you powers. It only reveals the strength you've built inside. And that's why the swords always reappear in stories, in myths, all over the world. They remind us that the strength and growth without wisdom is nothing. And that's why the real battles are always within. The sword is just a simple tool that sharpens that very fight. And if this resonated with you, then come check out the link in the description, which is my From Gamer to Swordsman, a program for beginners starting Longsword. You'll find there my full Longsword beginners course with step-by-step drills, mindset and accountability. And also a group of guys who walk the same path as you. So check out the link in the description. And remember, always take the initiative.